Call the meeting to order. If you'd please rise, honor our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
Mia Murphy?
Here.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Conway?
Here.
Mr. Gignac?
Here.
Mr. Leary?
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. We have under the special order of business the introduction of Susan Lynn, Director of Grants and Partnerships for the Lowell Public Schools, Partnership of Lowell Public Schools, UMass Lowell, and the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Susan Lynn to this community this evening. Ms. Lynn is our new Director of Grants and Program Development, and her role is funded through the Greater Lowell Foundation and private donors who have donated to Lowell Public Schools to build the future of the district through grant writing and securing future funding and extending initiatives that we're working on in very strategic ways. I'd like to welcome Susan and have her just introduce herself. We are very fortunate to have you here, and we welcome you to Lowell, Susan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so enthused to be here. I'm very excited to be your new Director of Grants and Partnership Development. Since I've come to Lowell 6 weeks ago, I've been working to understand Lowell, to understand the priorities of the school district, to understand what Lowell Public School students need to succeed, and putting together a strategic grant-seeking plan to help make that happen. In my first few weeks, I've put together a grants calendar, started partnership development activities, and thought about ways to really advance the Lowell Public Schools. And one of the things that I've talked about before that has really struck me is how invested all of you are, and the many other leaders in Lowell, in the betterment of the Lowell Public School system, so that our children have every ingredient they need for success in school and in college and career and beyond. So I really feel fortunate to be part of the team to help serve Lowell Public School students.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Next, we have in the minutes, approval of the minutes of the regularly scheduled school committee meeting of Wednesday, September 4th, 2013. Move to accept by Ms. Ross Sikowicz, seconded by Mr. Gignac. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have permission to enter. Permission to enter for September 18th, 2013. Madam Superintendent. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Got a little lost. To Melmark New England Incorporated, the amount of $9,000 to amend the existing contract to provide for the additional out-of-district tuition costs for 2 students enrolled in receiving services as outlined in their special education IEP. Funding will be provided by the school department budget special education tuition account. To Mount Prospect Academy Incorporated, in the amount of $49,885 to provide for the out-of-district tuition costs for 1 student enrolled in receiving services as outlined in the special education IEP. Funding will be provided by the school department budget special education tuition account. To the corporate design insurance, in the amount of $25,784 to provide student athletic accident insurance coverage to students with extended coverage for physical education classes, field trips, overnight included, and any school-sponsored activity or clubs. Funding provided by the school department budget student accident insurance. To the University of Massachusetts at Lowell Songus Industrial History Center in the amount of $38,775 to provide curriculum-based programs to students in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 8th, and 11th grades to enrich their content understanding and skill development of the American Industrial Revolution. Funding provided by the school department budget, field trip admission fees. To Donald Sullivan and Bruce Sullivan in the amount of $18,750 to provide on-site repair and service to a wide range of audio and visual equipment throughout the district. Funding will be provided by the school department budget contracted services.
Thank you. What's the wish of the committee? Move to approve by Ms. Rozikowicz, seconded by Ms. Scott. Roll call, please.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
7 yeas approved.
Thank you. Under memorials, we have Michael Lukacs, brother of Barbara Smith, a Merkland School teacher, and brother-in-law of Michael Smith, a Sullivan School art teacher. Claire Lynn Lambert, a retired Pawtucketville Memorial School teacher. And John P. Jack Flynn, Jr., brother of Leonard Flynn, retired Wang School principal, and uncle of Margaret Chase, an adult education teacher, and Sarah Waterhouse, adult education tutor. If you please rise in a moment of silence and darken chambers. Next, we have motions. First motion by Mr. James Leary. Request the superintendent provide to the school committee a report showing the number of students in each class throughout the district. In addition, provide recommendations to the school committee, including staffing changes for class sizes that have 25 or more students. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know, Mayor, if we probably should take report of the superintendent K through 8 enrollment update as part of this discussion with the motion. Some of the points that the superintendent brings forward as recommendations to the full committee are great ideas and ones that I could easily support. The one addition that I was envisioning when you look at the numbers, specific our kindergarten, I think the kindergarten, we need to do something in addition to what the proposals are. And I don't know if more thought should go into it before we do it, but I definitely think you definitely need more human resources in this area when you're having 27 kids in a kindergarten class. It's not really doable. It's one thing to have one class or something somewhere where you have resources where people are focusing on that number, but it's another thing entirely when you're having basically almost every class has that number of 26, when the optimum, as we know, is probably 20 to 22. Some of the recommendations could come forth as maybe we get an additional paraprofessionals this year. Maybe we get additional tutors for the kindergarten classes. In addition, the numbers you're looking at 7th and 8th grade, they're also large. Perhaps what we've done in the past is look at tutors to help facilitate through this bubble. I know that from our last meeting that a lot of dialogue and a lot of concentration has been reviewing this with John Dakota as well as NESDEC in terms of how do we get to this bubble without really knowing about it. I think that's part of the issue, but the other part of the issue is attacking the problem now and being, kind of like we say all the time, changing on the fly. So I really do appreciate the efforts that have gone into these recommendations, but I think if you have a child with 27 kids in a kindergarten, we need to do something today. And I think being creative, whether we get a tutor to help out through this year as we work through the bubble, or a paraprofessional, whatever is more, easier to do in terms of money-wise, but also to be effective. Because test scores for these kids, if you're going through a couple of years of bubbles, these test scores are going to go down as they get measured, because this is one of the most important years for them is in kindergarten. So again, I don't know if we should take this all at one shot and discuss it, or just come back with additional recommendations, maybe have it before the curriculum subcommittee at our next meeting. But I think we do need to be quick, because a lot, again, 27 kids in a kindergarten, even the best teacher's going to have challenges. Thank you.
Mr. Conway?
Utilize that will help us give us some type of prediction on the student enrollment for the kindergarten. Is that feasible, Madam Superintendent?
Interestingly, Mr. Conway, as a school system, we're very well tuned into the agencies like the Lowell International Institute, which receives our refugee children. And this isn't even impact with refugee children that we're seeing here. We haven't really even gotten that particular agency. when we look at the report later, you will see that 345 children or 42 students enrolled in the Lowell Public Schools since August 15th. And so we have used the NESDAQ numbers. We did not anticipate the newcomers to the city. That's the issue, but we do look at the resources and see if, in fact, there's other places that we can get information. As far as resources at this particular point, I know that economically, there are not a lot of opportunities out there, but maybe we could look into more volunteerism, but I know that we're looking to have professional staff. So I think that we really kind of unpack our resources to try and look what's coming, but we got
That
surprised.
315, is that a number that, I mean, let's say, for example, how would you compare that with last year? Is it something similar?
According to the data that we had asked from Mr. Jacoto, there are additional, probably another 40 to 50 more, to my recollection. So there are many more students. The case that it's all young students, when we looked at the NESDAQ numbers in advance, we were told with who were moving up and who was moving into the city, that we'd have about 21 or 2, and I believe. And then we would be adding students like we do add students. So we'd be topping at 24, probably. However, we do have 2 adults in every classroom, but being beyond 24 is something that is a challenge. So we didn't anticipate 81 new kindergartners. That's higher than, that particular concentration is higher, as well as the newcomer numbers are higher than we anticipated and we have had historically to enter our district. As everybody can recall, we have checked with the charter school, 108 Lowell children are at that charter school having classes. So that took the 108 extra classes we had, so we expected that normally would have the capacity with the numbers anticipated to absorb who came in the summer. So it's an extraordinary spike. I know that other urban districts have sent kindergarten, but we didn't expect this with the 108 children that we knew had already been enrolled in that charter. So I don't have explanation, but there are more students this year.
I know that it's obviously a little bit easier on the high school level to make those predictions, because if you look at a 5-year numbers, you'll see that there's some type of a consistency with it, or at least there's a trend that you can plan when you're taking a look at class size and so forth. But I agree with my colleague, and I'm sure we all agree with the fact is that when you're taking high numbers like we have in the kindergarten, that is such a critical area, as we all know. And, we need definitely to put our resources in there. And that's why I was just wondering if there is some way that any type of agency around that can help us out, to feed us information, so that it will make our prediction perhaps a little bit easier. Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Mr. Gignac, then Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question might be for Mr. Lang. How much do we pay NASDAQ to make these predictions for us each year? Off the top of your head.
It was a service we subscribed to last year. It's going to be something where the first year we actually had them do a long-range, kind of a 10-year enrollment projection and demographic study for us. It was in the ballpark of $5,000 or $6,000, something along that. I think every year it's a membership subscription, so it's about maybe $200 or $2,500 that we'll subscribe to, and then they'll do the updated forecast for us. If I could just touch on for a second,
Sure.
We did have a follow-up conversation with them just to try to get a better understanding of these numbers and exactly where they're coming from. The projection that they worked with us on in grades 1 through 8, we're really pretty close. We're only off a little bit here and there, and it was understandable given some of the fluctuation with the new charter school opening up. That was an unknown for us, parochial enrollments, things of that nature. The one number that, in our latest conversation, really does intrigue them also is the kindergarten number. Obviously, we don't have a couple of years of data to go on to figure out where those students are coming from. They look at all of the typical indicators. They look at birth rate, 5 years prior. They look at known public preschools that are going up to kindergartens, and they're really, intrigued by that number as well. And really working with us, we don't have a good answer for what data source is missing in that particular projection for kindergarten. So they are going to, over the course of the fall, work with us to actually do some kind of a survey of the existing kindergarten students to figure out where they came from, whether it's a public or private preschool. Is there another program or another pool that we're not looking at for that particular projection? Because this is the third year now that we've had extremely high kindergarten numbers. And this population is coming from some preschool, whether it be home, private, or whatnot, that we're just not capturing in the projection. So I think by surveying and really speaking with the existing kindergarten families to find out, where did they attend a preschool? Are they just coming from home settings or what? That might provide us some information. The other, and the superintendent mentioned, the other number that's really, that we don't have any control on, and NASDAQ can't help project either, is the tremendous number of kind of refugee and ELL students, the newcomers, that are coming from other countries. They're not in our projection anywhere. We basically have looked at over the last number of years how many particular students have come in to the district, and we have a number, but we really don't have an idea of what grade level they're going to come in at, if it's multi-families with multi-ages, what grades they're going to be at. And that's a number that we're all kind of struggling with. It's not quite as significant as the kindergarten number, but we are going to do that survey this fall to try to identify what's missing in the projection.
Thank you. It is troubling to see that NASDAQ had suggested that we would have between 22, 24 in a class size in kindergarten. In 27, 28, 29, that's huge for brand new students in our district for the most part. And when I initially received phone calls and emails about this issue, some parents were concerned that their class sizes were too large in kindergarten. I initially thought it was a case-by-case basis. It was only a few classrooms within the district. Once you receive this report, it seems like it's across the board, and that's not acceptable. These are very young students that deserve the attention, and it's very difficult, as Mr. Leary said, for even the very best teacher to provide that attention to each and every one of these 27, 28, 29 students. And I think we're beyond the bubble. Over the past 2 years, we've heard that there's a bubble of kindergartners coming into the district, but I think we're beyond that bubble. This is just an increasing number that is continuing to occur. So I'm not so convinced that NASDAQ is doing their job in regards to kindergarten, at least. Mr. Conway had mentioned using other resources to try to predict those numbers. But we need to think internally on how we can try to get a better grasp on that, because when we're looking at budget season, a few months ago, we were under an entirely different impression on what our class sizes were going to be, especially in the lower grade levels, because we had lengthy discussions on lower grade levels and the class sizes. So this is a major issue that we need to look at, and come the next budget season, we really have to have a better grasp on this. Whether it's tutors or additional staff members. I think your recommendation to open up an additional kindergarten class at the Rogers is one way to address it. However, that's not going to help the classes that are already at 27 and 28. So just another thing to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In many ways, I have to echo some of my colleagues' previous statements. I think that we are in year 3 of being surprised. So for the third time, we've been surprised by this exact thing. It's kind of hard to justify that. The reason we made the investment with this group was because we had 2 years where specifically kindergartners were just totally out of whack, compared to all of our other population studies. So we brought in experts to help us explain it. So, obviously we're in a position now where you have to question the validity of moving forward with that. I think we can certainly have a more drawn-out discussion about that in the future. Because I do think that it is something that we need to get a handle on, and we need to be able to make reasonably accurate predictions. I think, again, to piggyback on some of the other comments, I think we find ourselves in a situation where we simply need to do something. You know, I think my colleague, Mr. Lear, was saying we're looking at, you know, class sizes at an optimum at like 21. Well, the reality is that studies say 18. Kindergarten, first grade, your best class size for the best performance for students, for teachers, is 18 students. And as students get older, obviously that number goes up. But I mean, there's a very real breaking point at the third grade level at 8 years old, where past that, you can see numbers like 24, 25 and be very effective. But at that kindergarten, first, second, and third, between 18 and then in the third grade going up to maybe 21, 22, that's what's best for kids. To be in this zone of 27 to 29 it's just inappropriate, and I really think we're gonna need to take some immediate action. Certainly looking at the recommendations of the superintendent, I think should be our next step. But I would also introduce into the mix, you know, quite a while ago when we did have Classroom Size Reduction Act funding, which was specifically directed at this issue. It was recognizing that smaller class sizes were sometimes the most accurate predictor of success for students, that it is directly tied to performance. We did have, you know, it was an initiative at the state level to increase the number of teachers in a classroom. I know you mentioned we have 2 adults in classrooms. That's great. I think what we really need to start looking at is 2 teaching staff, you know, if we need to double up teaching staff, and start trying to look at some creative facility situations where, I mean, opening up the kindergarten kind of, you know, island at the Rogers, I think solved the problem last year. I don't know if extending that can help, but we do need to do something immediately, because we can't have students have a year of this. It's time that's wasted that those students and their families and our district can't you know, justify. So looking forward to looking at the recommendations of the superintendent in this report, and then I do think that this committee and the administration will need to work together to come up with some additional supports to put in place for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ross-Sikowicz and then Mr. Leary.
Thank you. I would echo my colleagues' concerns. I mean, obviously, a kindergarten class is at 28, 29 children is clearly unacceptable, but you know, we also see that bubble at the middle school. I mean, these classrooms are packed with lots of children into very small spaces, and there's a lot of activity that takes place, and I have to figure that a teacher it's that much more challenging to teach to that large a class. And I think we do need to be looking at this and perhaps looking at this more strategically. And, you know, you had spoken to our newcomers. You know, we have waves that come in year after year, and that has, you know, sort of increased our population, you know, in terms of enrollment, and that might beget our surprise, right? But there are agencies that are local to us, both the International Institute of Lowell and Boston, that are working with these different immigrant populations in resettling them. And many of those families are actually being, while they come in through Boston, they're actually being resettled here in Lowell, because there is a sister agency here in Lowell. And so I would think that it would be of benefit to our district if we're having ongoing conversations with the International Institute to really dial down on what those households look like. So from what I've been told, our next wave will be a group of Congolese immigrants who will be coming into the country. And that also lends itself to planning to accommodate those educational needs, the language needs for those families and for those children. And in long range, you know, we've had these discussions in our subcommittees about how we're using our buildings. And obviously, if there's a need across the board for more classrooms, then we need to look at opening up the Rogers School again, and perhaps even creating another citywide K through 8 school, so we can absorb that mass of children throughout the district and really lessen those loads. Thank you.
Mr. Leary.
Just thank you. I didn't want a lot of talk on it tonight, but in good points. two issues to separate. One, the class sizes and how we predict it. It's interesting when you look at Zone 1 and look at kindergarten to first grade, how it's really high and it drops off. You know, my kid was in Bailey last year with 27 kids in the class, but now they're 24. It's just interesting how it goes from really high to really low very quickly across the board in Zone 1. Zone 2, not so much. So I almost like we want to scrub the numbers to maybe look at the addresses to see where people are coming from, because they're leaving. And that's just my quick spidey sense when you look at the numbers real quick without diving into it, that maybe we need to take a second look at these numbers. Now, again, it always is good to take a second look. You never know. But it is just kind of ironic. Every single one of the schools, Bailey, McAvenue, Morey, Merkland, Pawtucketville, they all have huge numbers in kindergarten, but they go off to a more non-threatening class level in first grade, second, third, et cetera. Second point, and that can be scrubbed out. Second point, I'm very happy with the recommendations, but we really need to put somebody on the ground floor. We can have a discussion next week in a variety of different subcommittees, but really put a plan, find the resources, and do it, because if we don't do it, these numbers are going to affect us, and test scores and affect these kids. But thank you very much for those recommendations, and I know we'll put a good plan together that will meet the needs of our students and help our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can tap into that spidey sense to determine how many kindergartens there are going to be. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next motion by Ms. Kristen Ross-Sikwich. Request the superintendent work in partnership with public safety officials to provide education and outreach to our school families around the importance of securing children in car seat belts when transporting children. Seconded by Ms. Scott. Ms. Ross-Sikwich.
Thank you. The motion is self-explanatory. However, just to give a little background, a parent actually brought this forward to me. She drops her child off at the Morey School on a daily basis and will routinely observe children in cars also waiting to drop off children, unrestrained young children, toddlers, siblings of the grade schoolers at the Morey, and I've observed this myself, driving my own children to school, and certainly I think that there's a benefit there to, in partnering with our safety officers, and just to provide, number one, provide some outreach and some education to our parents, to our families as they're dropping off their children. They're essentially sitting ducks, waiting in line to drop off their child at the front door or side door or whatever the drop-off point is. And then also, just a flyer home that, that advises parents what their responsibilities are. I mean, it's a law that your children have to be restrained, and they have to be restrained in certain types of, in certain manner, depending on the age. So we certainly wouldn't want to see something happen to a child, as our families are dropping children off, and certainly has a greater value, as they bring that out into the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Mr. James Leary. Requested superintendent provide a status report on the fine arts program at Lowell High School. The report should include staffing and upcoming events for the 2013-2014 calendar year. Seconded by Mr. Gignac. Mr. Leary.
No, just thank you very much, Mayor. It's basically information to support the arts program. It's self-explanatory, really taking a look what are our events and are we staffing them appropriately, and there are other resources that we can bring in to assist. I know last year they had a high school play, and they didn't maybe not have had the resources up to back that play up, but looking at the organization, finding ways to make it a productive part of the Lowell High School as well as the middle school program, and tying in, envisioning tying in other departments to support that business program, business department, what have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Mr. James Leary. Request the superintendent provide the status of the Lowell High School student portal and to provide dates when the portal will be implemented from pre-K through 8. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Mr. Leary.
Thank you. Just quickly, the high school one, just to get an update numbers, but it's really important when we put the motion on in the past few years, we really wanted to bring the program K through 8, and I think it's needed. I think people are hungry for that information, so if we can get dates when we're going to implement that, maybe hurdles in terms of what you need to accomplish it. But I think it's time. This motion's like 3 years old. I think we need to really get the K through 8, at least get dates set up when we're going to try to initiate it, even if it's piloted. I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have subcommittee report, curriculum subcommittee report, and approval of the minutes of the meeting of Tuesday, September 10th, 2013. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. At the most recent Curriculum Instruction Subcommittee, present with myself, also Mr. Leary and Ms. Scott. From Central Administration, we had Superintendent Franco, Assistant Superintendent Abrams, and Susan Lin, our new Director of Grants and Partnership Development for the Lowell Public Schools. We had 4 basic topics we were discussing. First was Edwin, which is a new software package which is being developed basically at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We learned that it has been a fairly long and ongoing process for about 5 years now. And it is kind of reaching the point where it is about to become a live product that we can access. It is currently in a pilot phase in the Lynn Public Schools. Which were chosen because they also use X2, which is the administration software that we use for tracking individual student data. I think the key change with Edwin is that we'd be moving towards a software package that really supports classroom work, taking Common Core standards and being able to translate them into actual activities and instruments and assessment tools. So it is a much more comprehensive package that we are hoping that we'll be able to see implemented here in the city of Lowell. We did have some questions around that we had posed to Assistant Superintendent Abrams about exactly what kind of functionality it would have, not just for teachers, but in some cases for students and their ability to access some of the assessments in an electronic format, as well as the ability for parents to be able to interact with the data. So I don't know, I know that you were doing some investigating, Assistant Superintendent Abrams. I don't know if you have any additional information for us this evening.
Sure. The Edwin tool is really a tool for administrators and for teachers. That's a tool that has really 2 parts to it. There's Edwin Analytics, and that's where we have all the data that will be coming from our system that will be fed right into the Department of Ed. And then the teaching and learning part, and that is the part of the system that will have curriculum mapping, assessments, pre and post test, any data, any information that teachers want to put up their lesson plans, the model curriculum units that are now being done throughout the state. We have some of our teachers on the team as well, looking at the new Common Core standards. So that really is a tool that teachers and administrators will be able to use. In terms of the parents, and we just talked about a little bit with Mr. Leary's motion, the portal or Edline, which is the tool that will be user-friendly for parents, they'll be able to gather this information as it gets implemented in a much easier fashion, but be able to get their students' scores and things like that. So that's the difference, and that's what it was.
Thank you very much. So certainly coming online will be it'll be a real resource for administrators, for teachers, and ultimately really for our parents. Our second topic of the evening had been Race to the Top federal grant proposal. We did discuss this at the subcommittee. Certainly it was a very ambitious idea. My sense, from the subcommittee and then from some subsequent conversations, is that the decision was made that based on the timeline and basically on the criteria of the grant, the decision was made that it was not a strategic time to go for this grant, that there'll be other Race to the Top, certainly initiatives that will be better situated to take advantage of. This was a really incredibly competitive process, the way it was outlined in the Federal Register, and the determination was made that it would not be a good use of time. So certainly I support that as we move forward and look forward to other better opportunities. Our third topic was the Standard Bearer School Progress Update. We did receive information about all of our Standard Bearer schools and the work that they're doing collectively, their entire administration and teaching staff on a number of different topics as they're selecting kind of their key indicators and doing the work around that to see improvement in their schools, talking a great deal about improved instruction, collaborative planning. So those are moving forward. I think what's most encouraging about this is that they really are drafting on the plan from our Merkland school, and really taking what has worked so very well at the Merkland in terms of a true turnaround, and using that same process now in these other schools to bring them up to the level 1 status that the Merkland has been able to achieve. I don't know if the superintendent would like to say anything about that, because it's kind of on the agenda, and it would be great to hear that good news.
Yes, this morning, there was a very strategic plan by the Department of Education to keep the embargoed information about level 4 school in 5 schools very confidential. And so we found out about 8 o'clock this morning that the Merkland School would be exiting from level 4 status to level 1. And this committee knows that we had determined already that if the Merkland was going to be redetermined as out of level 4, then we in fact would be a level 1 school. And that's 2 years. So that those MAGs, they call them, the measurable annual goals, have been solid for at least the last 2 years. So it was wonderful news, followed up by the webinar had Union President Paul George is with me and Assistant Superintendent Abrams. We waited until the governor was announcing, because it had to be after the governor that we delivered the news. But Union President Paul George and I went to the Merkland School and congratulated every adult and kid. The children were very excited. It was a big scream. It was very fun. And so later this week, on Friday, we will find out if there are any additional determinations of level 4 and plus the data, but we will keep you all informed. But it was wonderful news, but it is what education is all about. It takes everybody working to the core of the outcomes. And people were so happy that we were there, but it was everybody's work. And as you know, the message that I sent you all in the announcement today, it's the district, it's the state, it's the school, but it's especially the leaders who believe in the power of all of the teachers and everybody who works there, or custodian staff, the kitchen staff were elated, the nurse was in tears. It was really a lovely time. So thank you for bringing that moment here, Miss Martin. But this is what we expect in every building: sharing leadership, shared accountability. Everybody's in this. We can figure it out together, and that's the vision. And so it was really wonderful work there, but I know that we're going to see other schools that are making progress towards that outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, I think we've proven that it can be a truly powerful model for taking individual schools that face real challenges with their population and with the students that they're working with, and collectively working together can really have a profound impact. And I'm most pleased to see that, again, what we've seen work and what we can point at as a real success story, we're now replicating in these other schools. So the standard bearer schools are following that same process, and we are confident that we will see the same kind of dramatic results there. Our fourth topic was an update from the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. It is long and sundry, with many accomplishments of their very talented and committed staff. So it really it does give a 4-page snapshot of everything that's been going on in the district in the last couple months. Much more impressive than the business operations area. So it really, the work that's being done is clearly so focused on the work our students need to see. So I applaud that office and the work that they're doing, and I would submit all of that collectively as a report of progress.
Motion by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Rossikwich. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, So voted. Thank you. Next, we have reports of the superintendent, the K through 8 enrollment update. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, and we begin this conversation with Mr. Leary's motion, and just to go into detail, all of you are in receipt of a report that tells the average class size across the district. The pieces of this particular report that are of grave concern are the kindergarten numbers, and keeping the at least 1 through 4th grade numbers pretty consistently, which we anticipate to be able to happen. There is consistency, but the numbers are high in grades 5 and 7 and 8 across the system as well. So I just want to talk about what we've put in for support over time, and we do additionally have some concerns about the newcomer program. I just remember the number because 2 weeks ago at this same meeting, we had 23. We have 36 in 2 weeks. And Mr. Dakota talked to me about 3 newcomer children that were being tested. So I don't know if that was 39 or 36. So that's, the numbers are just appearing before our very eyes. So the first recommendations, and I will want to speak about the fact that in our district over time, we have added many classrooms. And the reopening of a school like the Rogers School has got to be a critical move, and we have to start that planning very soon, like in the fall, thinking about the budgeting and whatnot for that particular piece. However, in trying to set up other classrooms out there in the city, which we did a couple of years ago, we have over 70 self-contained special education classrooms in our district, across the district, and that's for children on the autism spectrum. Those are children with emotional disabilities or language-based classrooms. And so in finding the space in the district to say, gee, let's open a class, that has been a challenge. So when we came to the recommendation, there was much thought, many meetings. Also, we thought about if we opened an additional class, which you'll see that second recommendation, we could offer transfers across the district to the Rogers for a second class. But we know that when people belong to a school community, we're not thinking that there's going to be people who are going to kind of take us up on that offer. So the first recommendation that's really important is, we talked about the numbers, over 300 children, 342 children, but to look and see if we could freeze the classrooms at the enrollment. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing, and we may probably want to talk about other things, but that enrollment would freeze. We would not add extra staff to out there, extra children. As early as this approval, any child would come to the Rogers, and that would have to be the only choice at this point for kindergarten. Fix it. And we would actually first talk about siblings. So there are about 10 siblings. So that would be siblings that would come out of the other schools, siblings of the first graders at the Rogers. So we would offer that first to those families for them to come to the Rogers School because they do have the first grade sibling upstairs when there is a K in one family. So that will be one way that we would fill that kindergarten, and then any new student would come into that kindergarten. We're thinking that we're not going to get another 30 children, but we don't have that data, so another recommendation might possibly be that to come back to you if it sets at over 24 at that Rogers School, that we might have to come back for more, but that's what we're looking at right now for the Rogers School piece for kindergarten. Also, additionally, the other recommendation is to freeze first grade. First grade numbers at the Rogers School right now are at about 19. So we would say any first grader coming into the district would also come to the Rogers School. So those numbers out there in grade 1 would be frozen, and there's a little bit more flexibility. But Mr. Leary makes an excellent point, and it's not, a challenging mathematical issue. If we had 27 children at the end of the year, and we do lose. By the end of the year last year, our kindergarten numbers out there were about 23, 24, because we do lose children during the year, not being a mandatory program in kindergarten. We would have, so when you look at the first grade numbers, we've lost children. We lost children from the end of kindergarten last year into grade K, into grade 1, our own children, into that particular place. So our recommendation would be freeze first grade, fill the Rogers School. We probably have 5 slots times 4 classrooms, so there's 20 slots. So no new kindergartens that go out to the community, other schools. In grade 7 and 8, there's been an average class size 26, little over 26 in grade 7 and grade 8. We wanted to remind the committee that this school committee have provided 4 additional tutors to the middle schools. You kept the 4 additional tutors in those budgets, in the budget this year. So middle schools probably have about 10 extra tutors in the schools, and they use strategically in those classes across the system. So although the numbers are high, there are additional hands on deck that the committee continued to support. And so we've been looking across the district to see if there are any other remedies, but we thought that just to right now stop the bleeding, that there wouldn't be additional numbers sent out there to schools, that the recommendation would include those particular things: hiring 1 additional kindergarten teacher and a paraprofessional for the Rogers at this time. Monitor kindergarten enrollment to ascertain if we need a second kindergarten and paraprofessional with school committee authorization. In case it gets past that, just so we come to you, you will know why we're coming again. We don't anticipate it, but I don't want to say that with any kind of authority in case we have more children than we think are coming. Cap the class size in all schools. Offer transfer to families with siblings to the Rogers. Hire an additional K through 4 newcomer teacher with 1 paraprofessional for the Rogers School. That would take us closing the professional development at the Rogers, one of those classes, for newcomer programs. We would set it up for K4 kind of a setup, but if in fact we go over another 20 children, and I'm saying I'm not anticipating that, but I do not want to be caught that we're not planning ahead at this meeting appropriately, then we would come back to you for additional teacher or para to put that particular piece in place. We did come up with a proposal, a cost proposal for that recommendation. And at this time, we're recommending funding the 4 additional positions if they're approved from the suspense account. Suspense account has $143,086 in the recommendation for this addition of staff would be $133,840. Again, Mr. Lang did explain a bit about the NASDAQ and that disconnect, and working more closely with them to make sure that there is a better recommendation. The suggestions of the committee as far as the local nonprofits and diverse community agencies, and getting on board with knowing the community pre-K places that are out there to make sure we have better numbers. That's the recommendation that we have to date. I welcome suggestions, comments, and concerns.
Thank you. Ms. Rossikwich and then Ms. Martin.
Sure. My only question was if it came down to us having to hire an additional our additional staff to accommodate additional classrooms, we don't have more money remaining really to accommodate that in our suspense account. So my question would be, how do we pay for that? I mean, it's a needed service. I mean, this is where the fact that the company that we contracted to provide the service to help us to project out what our needs were going to be for our student population for this year, and we based our budget on that, and that's really problematic. I mean, this is a very expensive mistake that this company has, given the information that this company has given us. It's very costly for us. So I'm curious as to where we're going to come up with additional funds to pay for additional classrooms when, after this appropriation, we're only going to have about $10,000 remaining in this suspense account. So how do we accommodate that? Thank you.
Madam Superintendent?
That's where the recommendation has to grow. I mean, we would have to look at, in staffing, we are fully staffed. It's not, we don't have unfilled positions. We are fully staffed, and we need every single body to do that work. We would have to look at perhaps things like materials, things like other kind of places where there may possibly be overages. Mr. Lang was looking at the budget. We had been talking about what could other steps be, but we were looking at line items that were decided for regular operations, you know, in general. And we did make this recommendation with this fee. If you want us to go back for additional funding type sources in different scenarios, we can get them to you quickly and bring a subcommittee meeting together next week, whenever we could, to get a recommendation.
I just want to respond to that just quickly. So I would, myself personally, I would much rather Mr. Lang look into our budget to see where there are overages or where there's excess that we can pull from before we start dipping into our suspense account. Thank you.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. Just so I understand the recommendation, so you're basically, the first recommendation would be to hire an additional kindergarten teacher and para for the Rogers School. And then the other one was for basically the same recommendation at the Rogers, but for the newcomer classroom. So can I ask, is that anticipating that there would be a dramatic shift in population at the Rogers? Because as I look at it, those look like the most reasonable.
That would be able to stop any new student coming in would go directly to the Rogers. So it would direct any new first grader that comes into the district is going to go to the Rogers. So we'd not be sending anybody out to the schools around town. We would keep those first graders at the Rogers. Kindergarten, the same. We would try and fill with the 10 siblings, offer that to parents so their children will be in the same school. And then any new student that comes into the district, we will not be sending any other to other schools. There'll only be one choice for those. So that was sincerely, Ms. Martin, to be honest, to stop the bleeding, that we weren't going to send any more additional bodies up there, to stop any new transition to buildings. And if in fact there's transiency, or we take 10 children from siblings and bring them to downtown, that would cut down the numbers a bit. It is not an aggressive plan to cut all the numbers down to the 24 or below, but it is the way to say, these are the kids you have now, you're not getting any more. If there's extra support systems you want to think about, but that's why the recommendation, it's kind of at this point the least restrictive, not adding more possibilities. If you're going to add even as little as 2 tutors to every building, we were saying that's about
$500,000 to $750,000.
about $500,000 to just 2 tutors to each building, to just have extra instructional time for a couple of hours shared between 2 teachers. That would be the least costly if we put 2 tutors times 14 buildings for part of the day, which is not by any means full implementation. Having paraprofessionals would be more expensive. So those are the things we've been talking about for the last few days.
If I could, I'd like to make a motion, because my concern is that I don't want us trying to address this problem, and it's a significant problem, in a piecemeal kind of way. What I think, my motion, if the chair would consider, is that we request of the administration that you develop a more comprehensive approach to addressing the overpopulation of our kindergarten classrooms, and come up with a couple different options. Obviously, looking at the numbers that would be involved, looking at how we accommodate that, so that the report would include not only your best recommendations, but also where you'd find those savings within the existing budget. And as I say, maybe a couple different options, because I think we're going to need to be very thoughtful in the way we do this. But for myself, I believe what you've recommended at this point is just status quo. It's just we've got a bad situation, and here's how we keep it from getting any worse. That can't be our stopping point. We really need to address these kindergarten numbers in a more aggressive way. So I would make that in the form of a very succinct motion. I'm sure the secretary has it.
Motion by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Leary. On the motion, Mr. Leary.
No, I think it's a good motion. I think first of all, we have more money than the expense account. You forget the food service, we have about almost $500,000. So we do have more money to take a time and think. And I agree with Ms. Martin that we have to really step back and think. I think the recommendations are pretty good. I think that we can all agree that the numbers we have now, we have to stop at that number. But I think Ms. Martin's correct. Let's really take a second look at how we can, develop a plan that's going to be meaningful. You really have then, talking about $500,000, you get almost $700,000 that we know about before we go through how our projections are going throughout the year. So let's do it with some confidence. Let's do it with some intelligence. Let's put up a good plan. Let's do it rather quick. Let's not wait till November to do this. Let's have a meeting in the next few weeks and decide where we want to allocate it, what's the best fit for the current situation. A point that you made, Madam Superintendent, some of the students may drop off at the end of the year. That's something that we can look at, historical data, to make those decisions as we go forward. As far as the report, obviously it's disappointing, but at the end of the day, one of the things with newcomers coming, and I heard you're going to have more newcomers coming in from the Middle East with Syria, with the war, that's going to be a changing dynamic. We're no longer etched in stone by the budget. We have to be able to change on the fly. And part of that dynamic is really thinking creatively and not panicking. Just think with some confidence. Mr. Conway, with an earlier meeting today, was pointing out bringing in the grant writer, how effective that is. That's going to help us be more aggressive. Maybe there's opportunities there. So maybe we can align her in this area first to help out. So I think that's important. One other thing that I think Mr. Conway said too tonight was about, we do get money for the newcomers. How does that factor in? When do we get that money? How does it play? So I think it's important that we step back a minute, take a look at the information, and make an intelligent plan, which I know we'll do that, but we need to do it in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Conway and then Ms. Scott.
I think Mr. Leary just answered my question as far as the additional monies are concerned, but let me just add a little something to that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent, how much additional monies do you get for each newcomer? And when does that money come in? Does that money follow the newcomer at the beginning, or is it at the end of the year? How does that work?
The LEP count is about 500. It's not more money if you're a newcomer or if you're ready to exit. The LEP count is about $500, or has been, per student. It goes to Title III, and it usually is learned for professional learning. In Title III, it's probably about less than $3 million, and it's for professional learning. There's a couple of positions, not many, on that particular grant. So it's about $500 total for the LEP kid, and newcomers don't get any more, even though the services for children who are brand new to the country take more. You want 2 adults with them, so you don't.
When you say additional monies, what are we talking about? Would it be, let's say, 1.5? Would it be 1.5 times or double what it would take?
You get the regular Chapter 70 allotment plus $500 beyond. So it is not just because they're a child who speaks English second language and they're limited English proficient. So you get the full FTE, but it'll be next October 1st that those numbers will be increased.
I mean, this is something that I think we probably have to address with the delegation, that, these are additional resources that are needed. If they're going to, if we're going to obviously, we take in additional newcomers, but the fact is, I think we need the resources, because we're already setting up a budget. And this, as you said, would it be 1.5 or 2 times the cost of a mainstream student? And I mean, these monies, once that budget has already been set, I mean, I think we just heard this as far as how much money can we play with at this point? And there's very, very little money. So where does it come from? And I think that's why we have to, I think going forward, I think we need to sit down with the delegation and let them know that this is a tremendous burden that is placed on our school system after our budget is already set. And I don't think every community runs into this problem. So I think it's something that we need to sit down and talk about. Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Conway. It's interesting. There are a couple of points I want to make. If anybody had looked at parts of Governor Patrick's budget, he had talked about urban districts like Lowell getting additional funding for children who take more time to educate. So our newcomers without formal schooling, our regular newcomers, children who have special needs. That budget had different formulas for what urban centers like ours needed, and that did not pass through legislation. Another part that was very disappointing, and I did bring this up to my colleagues in the urban superintendents as well as the Secretary of Education when he made his visit here, was that we received $350,000, $330,000 for a summer program for LEP students. That was the decision. We were told how to spend it for a summer program. I could have hired 8 ESL teachers. And so some of the decisions that are made, that yes, these are wonderful programs, but we're given specific ways to spend it. And everybody who understands education in this room knows that that was a huge disappointment to the city of Lowell. Now, we just heard that if you receive governor's money for the Career Academy, which we did set up at the Malloy, and for the LEP students, you will get no governor's money this year. So in the advice they ask for us as practitioners, as superintendents, and sometimes when you're told to spend money, and that's what we need to work on as a state, what it is, their core programs. We need the extras for children, absolutely, but the core programs are disappointing, and those were 2 recommendations by the governor through his money, and that they did not come through. So that was a huge hit to us as a district, because we're very diverse, and we're becoming more diverse.
Thank you. Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to reiterate what my colleague stated about reaching out to the delegation. My comment was also going to be about the funding for the newcomer program. And another area that we may want to take a look at, I'm curious about, is the single count date in October and how that affects us with the newcomer population coming in. If that's another area to discuss with them. And I did just have one other consideration maybe for us to think about. If we have a subcommittee meeting, could we consider inviting someone from the International Institute to maybe speak with us about forecasting and any other input that they can provide us going forward? Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Excuse me? It was made by Ms. Martin. Yeah. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Motion to accept the report as a report of progress, so moved by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Rossikwich. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have a report of the superintendent on the progress on district-determined measures. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, I have just provided you all with the latest kind of a synopsis from the Department of Education about district-determined measures, and to just keep you up to speed that the next very important initiative that we are working on is the data that it takes for us to prove that children are growing and as that we go. And so you'll see that through the Joint Commission of Educator Evaluation, we're looking at what tests we're going to use. And as a district, we're looking at what tests. The first year of district-determined measures that have been mandated by the state of Massachusetts, that's the assessment to make sure kids are growing as we go, are in 5 areas. The areas are going to be elementary mathematics, elementary English language arts, middle school math, high school writing to content, and one other undetermined subject area we're thinking in the arts. So we are looking at the formative assessment pieces and the mandates that the state of Massachusetts are asking us to show that children are growing with the formative assessment we collect. So when we have district determined measures, of course, you will use MCAS or PARC, which we are a PARC pilot district. We found information about that. We'll keep you posted today. We just got some information. But when these district determined measures are really proving that children are progressing as they go through their courses. And so we have to prove that. By next year at this time, every subject area, every grade level has to have a way to prove that children are growing. And that's a very important and very technical piece of the education evaluation. So how you measure growth over time with young people is not just going to be one indicator. It will be growth data. It will be formative assessment data. So you can see that the teaching is impacting and producing outcomes. So we'll be working on this. I'm going to keep you all posted through the curriculum subcommittee meeting because it's complicated work, but I just wanted to give you the heads up that we are choosing tests along with teachers, especially with administrators. We're looking at the details. There's quite a bit of validity and reliability, as there always is an assessment, to make sure that we're choosing the right testing items and information to build for the future. But I just wanted to give everybody an update on what regulation requires and what, in fact, the district is working on, and we will keep you informed.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report? Entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress. So moved by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have the list of eligible teachers. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the monthly meeting report that you have of the most current list of eligible teachers who are able to work in our district.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report? Entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress. So moved by Ms. Rosikowicz, seconded by Ms. Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have the personnel report. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, these are all the people who have retired, resigned, or been promoted since the first day of school, and for your review.
Any discussion? Entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress. So moved by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have home education. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, we have a new request from parent Gail Medina from Monroe Street, who is asking to homeschool her child. It will make the homeschool total of families with 45 children receiving homeschooling in our city.
Thank you. Motion to approve by Ms. Rosikowicz. Ms. Rosikowicz.
Thank you. So my question is, and I think I know anecdotally that you do collect this information, but for what reasons do parents identify that they wish to homeschool their students rather than send their children to Lowell Public Schools?
Students make a request. We have a whole process of what their plan of studies takes into consideration. They don't really legally have to really give much information. It's always reviewed by our lawyers. They then are approved. You have to be approved by the school committee. And then we have a mid-year check-in, and then we also have an end-of-year check-in with the curriculum and to see if, in fact, the parents are providing the services. So that's the protocol. Legally, people can request to homeschool their students, and there is, we respond as we legally appropriately have to. There's not a lot of leeway, but there are certain systems that school system can put into place, and we put into place any liberty we can take, which is making sure we're checking in, making sure there's progress. Students who are homeschooled have access to our buildings. They can come to gym, music, and art. We do have some people who do that. They can participate in anything of the district, but it is sincerely up to the parent if they wish to have this homeschooling network, and we do everything within our legal bounds to guide it.
I just have one additional question, and I guess I didn't articulate this first off. So we're not, or parents aren't obligated to provide any specific reason as to why they wish to homeschool their students rather than sending them to Lowell Public Schools or a public school?
Legally, they don't have to provide a good deal of detail. They usually have a statement of intent, but they don't have to really get into much detail legally, and so we ask for purpose, we ask for why, but they can provide not the much detailed, not a very detailed response.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Does the committee wish to approve? So moved by Ms. Rossick, seconded by Ms. Scott. Roll call, please.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Next, we have the 21st Century Community Learning Center update. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is some good news. The McAuliffe School has received a grant for the community 21st Century Community Learning, and so there will be, we were funded. There were only 9 applicants and 27 applicants, and we were one of the 9 that was funded. So this gives us programs for summer school and after school at the Morey, the Greenouch, the Shaughnessy, the Robinsons, Jocklosa, Lowell High Freshman Academy, and now the McAuliffe. And we want to thank Ms. Durkin for the report, and also the Coordinator of Special Programs, Carolyn Rocheleau, and the McAuliffe staff for this successful grant.
Thank you. Any discussion? Motion to accept the report as a report of progress. So moved by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have convention and conference requests. The following Merkland staff to attend the Literacy for All Conference in Providence, Rhode Island on the dates specified. The cost of $2,185 for the conference fees and $500 for 5 substitute teachers will be paid by the Merkland School Professional Development Funds. What's the wish of the committee? Move to approve by Mr. Leary, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz, seconded by Mr. Conway. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We stand adjourned.